Thank you all. It's a privilege to be in your presence today. All of you are extremely bright people. Many of you may be PhDs, obviously been in organizational development for quite a long time, so I'm very humbled to be here with all of you. I'm hoping today that you'll just kind of be a sponge, squeeze out all the things that you don't need. Maybe you can take out a few things that you can use, but also if we can just hold questions and maybe share some of those things at the very end of maybe some key takeaways for you. Also, we will try to fit in a little bit of activity about the key things that I want to talk about today, but give you a little bit of inflection around kind of my life and my experiences, but what I've learned and what I know that some of the things that academia can't teach you. And I truly believe that leadership is a behavior, and you really can't teach that. And there really is some real-time value in that. And I also believe that you need top-down leadership, but you also need a lot of bottom-up leadership. So let's jump in there. A little bit about me. Shannon did a great job, 35 years in the healthcare industry. I am here in St. Louis because of a merger and acquisition. To give you a little bit of background about me, it's 1993, and I'm recently divorced. I have two very, very small children at that time. Got back from the hospital, I had my knee reconstructed, I'm on crutches, my mom's taking care of me, right? Trying to help me take care of my children. To get a phone call at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I was working for a pharmaceutical company at that time, that said, congratulations, we'd like to offer you a job. And it's not in Springfield, Missouri, which is where I lived. It was in St. Louis. And I said, how long do I have to make up my mind? They said 24 hours. If you don't take the job, you don't have pay and you don't have severance. So it changed my world. And so that is why I'm here, is because that company brought me here. So with that, change feels like, this next picture right here. It feels very much like that for me. I did well and I made it here, but when you're a single mom going into a brand new city, right, especially something like St. Louis, from my small town, I had to find everything that we know that we need to find, right? Doctors, schools. My territory at that time was North County, Central West End, and I had the public city clinics. So it was a change for me. So today what I want to give you is, these are the objectives. I think this is a really important piece of change, is really making sure that you're solving the right problem. What I have learned over my lifetime in my career is that 100% of the time, nobody is solving the right problem. If you don't solve the right problem, it's hard to be able to figure out where your strategy is going to come from. So if you're executing on the wrong problem and you have a strategy, what you find is 3 months later, 6 months later, guess what? Profitability is not increasing. Your teams are not doing well. They're still a little bit dysfunctional. So we're going to talk about, how do you get there? How do you solve some of the right problems? How do you manage these behavioral shifts in teams? I am a firm believer in team coaching. I think one-on-one leadership coaching is imperative. When you place that together with team-based coaching, things change. They do just change. It all change and shift is. And then how to identify some of those traps that really get in the way. So as I said, this is everybody. This is how it feels like this. This picture is also indicative of something that I experienced as a leader back in May the 22nd of 2011. Does anybody know what this is? It is the Joplin tornado. It is the Joplin tornado. So I started managing in 2008 for GSK. So I was known as the change manager because I always had the teams that were underperforming. They brought me in because I truly believe that I am a servant-based leader. I think when you serve the people that you're leading, you're going to get more out of them. So I believe that is what made me different than anyone else, because I could see a little bit different than some of the leaders. With that, I was managing Kansas City at the time. The territory was Kansas City, Missouri. It was Springfield, Missouri. It was Joplin. In March of 2011, my RVP came to me and he said, hey, we've got this consulting group coming in and they're doing some really great things with leaders and we'd like to know if you'd like to be a part of that. And I said, absolutely, right? So they did their needs assessment. They came in and wanted to talk with me and coach through that. So at this time, on May the 22nd of 2011, it's 4:30 in the afternoon. And it's a really bright sunny day because I'm in Kansas City, right? And I see this huge cloud and I think, that's weird. So my coaches are standing here with me and we're getting ready to have this debrief. And my phone started to blow up and it was my rep in Joplin. And she said, I can't find my husband, I can't find my daughter, and I can't find my son. She said, I'm turning around, I'm going back. So from that point on, we all know that everything in the waves for the phones all shut down. The news was going off. It looked like a nuclear war zone had hit, right? Because the tornado was exactly almost 10 miles wide. So with that, I stopped the coaches and I said, we got to stop. We need to figure out what is the vision that this team wants to execute, because we can't take on a process without being able to make sure that we're all on the same page. So we stopped that day and said, what are we going to do? We're now Patty. What do they need from us? So we covered the room in paper, right? And we said, what do we want to do? We said we want to be able to go down there and take a role for her that would bring things, supplies. Can we get there? We don't know if we can get there. What does that really look like? So we created a plan. We took money out of our pockets. We went and bought certain things that we knew that we needed at that time. And I said, I don't even know if we can get there, so let me go first. So I went and took water and food as soon as I could navigate down I-44 and actually get into where Patty was. It was absolutely jaw-dropping. I don't know if any of you, did anybody go to Joplin right after the tornado? And if you were with Mercy, yeah, you know what that looks like. Mercy did a lot to support that project. Mercy was totally devastated, did an amazing job stepping in for their people and for that community, so kudos to Mercy. With that, we worked night and day, and this picture I cannot stress to you, this was what it was like that day. It was raining. I never asked GSK if I could have permission to go, but we went because we were called to go, and I truly believe that. We went down there, we made a difference for Patty, we helped dig out of her home, and we were there until 11 o'clock at night. We drove back to Kansas City, and then we executed the process. So the first key learning for anybody is that if your team does not create their vision for what they would like to execute, because I think you've got to have strategy, you've got to know what the strategy of your company is, that's very important. But if you are having a team, and let's say you've got different teams across the United States, your market's going to be a little bit different. You got to understand what's going on in your market. You got to be able to have a vision, and your people need to figure out what is going to compel them to be a part of that change. That was a game changer for me, and it worked. So we came back to execute that process. So the first thing you got to do, obviously, is establishing trust. If you don't have the book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, get it. Probably most of you have it, knowing all of you. If you don't have it, get it. Trust is a foundational truth for every team. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything to work from. You've got to create that. You also have to create a safe environment for people to do and go through change. And you absolutely have to figure out how to frame and formulate the right problem. Once again, it is a big issue for most companies that I work with, and we'll talk about why that exists, but you absolutely have to have trust and also the framework in order to get where you want to go. Because if you don't, what happens is everybody points the finger, right? Everybody does, especially if there's a big shift. Back in GSK, as I was talking about in 2000, the mid-2000s, GSK was slapped with a $3.6 billion fine for inappropriately detailing products. During that point in time, we were being paid for scripts. That's how you got paid for your compensation. When there's a shift and change for KPIs and how people are paid, we went from a paid performance into a more behavioral component of that. When that starts to take a subjective feel for managers, all of a sudden a lot of finger pointing goes on, right? So if you're not doing well, your performance is dropping, fingers start to get pointing, and so obviously that's the issue. And it all comes down to, are you solving the right problem? So there's a lot of facts, there's a lot of myths. People come up with these on their own because it's a people issue. It just is. So why does that happen? It's because we know that you need to perform, your leaders need to perform, where you are in the middle in an organizational development role or wherever that may be for change, you know, you're going to feel a lot of heat from the top because they need to perform, right? Then the people at the bottom are going to feel a lot of that. So it creates a lot of emotion. There's a lot of fear going on for a lot of people. This is a people issue, right? Because what happens when change happens is it's people. If you don't have all of the information, if there's not clear communication around what's going on in your company, people are great about making up your own stories. We all do it. So if there is an empty space, we're going to fill it. And we're going to fill it with stuff that makes us feel very comfortable. That is just who we are. We're all guilty of it. I would love to tell you that I'm not guilty of it, but I can be guilty of it too. So the biggest job that you have is making sure that people can stay in the truth of the situation. That is a very difficult thing to do because people don't like to go there. So it causes a lot of head noise for people in change. So just know that it is that piece, it's this cloud above this woman's head or any man's head. Men think a little bit differently than women. That's a whole nother talk. And there's nothing new about that, right? We all know about that. Men are very linear thinkers. Women are very creative thinkers. The more creative we get, sometimes the more noisy things get for us. And that is one thing we do know. So with that, it creates a tremendous amount of stress for everybody. If you're not able to get on top of, you know, helping people solve the right problem, what happens is now you have a domino effect. And we'll talk about some of that timing when you come in to change within organizations. That's really an important thing to understand. If you don't have communication and your company is going through change, make sure you have a good communication plan for your company. I always ask my CEOs if they are going through a merger and acquisition, a restructure, there's got to be something that's got to be coming weekly. If it's not coming weekly, you're giving them too much time to think about how to fill their black cloud. They will fill it. And that little black cloud has a life, and it affects everybody else in the organization. So you have to really keep a tap on that. So that communication piece is really, really important to give people hope. But no one likes to talk about it, right? Because it is the elephant in the room, right? No one likes to talk about it. It's tough to go there. People don't want to talk about feelings. People don't want to talk about emotions because they don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want to be seen as different. They don't want to be seen as not supportive. So what happens is they start to fill in these empty places and these empty holes. So what is the real problem? So when you manage from the middle, especially from where you may sit, from your middle management, it kind of feels like kryptonite. At least it felt for me kind of like kryptonite, right? You're kind of running after things. You have to manage the business. You have to manage the numbers. You are a business manager, right? If you're not moving market, you're not creating value in the company, then you're not seen as a very valued leader. If you don't take care of the people underneath and take care of these crucial problems for them and solving the right problem, you will never be able to strategically execute at a high level. I promise you that. So why is it? It's because you have to learn how to manage this uncertainty, this fear, there's hopelessness, there's lack of safety, lack of trust for people inside of the company, jealousy, and there's a lot of angst. To say there's not jockeying and political jockeying for a place, it happens. Men do it very, very well. Women don't do it well, I will say that. I think there is opportunity to kind of think about how do you leverage that without it kind of feeling kind of dirty per se, but everybody's got to have to play some sort of a political role in where you are in the company, but how you do that is important. But these emotions are extremely hard to manage. And here's why. This came out of the Journal of Applied Corporate Finance. Angen Thacker is one of my professors. So let me get a show of hands. Who has graduated from the Olin Business School? Has anybody graduated here from Olin Business School? Okay, great. So this will be new. Great, super. Angen Thacker is amazing. 2 months ago, I want to say it was the August issue of HBR, he wrote an article with Bob Quinn. If you have not read that article, get it. It's a good article. He talked a lot about what happened in 2008, 2009 in the financial crisis is because of how people were compensated, bankers, moving money, however that may be. So understanding how people are compensated in your organization will dictate their behavior, right? If you don't understand how they're being compensated, you do need to know that. So when you look at a company who's being bought or acquired, right, this looks really, really, I don't know if you can see this, but when you start to look at an acquisition, you're going to have your shareholder value is going to go up. So obviously everything's pretty hush-hush, right? What we do know at close day, everything drops out of the bottom, right? It just does. Shareholder value drops. 70 to 90% of your mergers and acquisitions will fail because people don't take care of the piece that I'm talking to you about today. It's the piece underneath. It's the layers underneath the ice that you've got to get to. If you're not solving the right problem for these people and you're not having a plan ahead of time, expect your share value to drop out the bottom. It will happen. Then what happens? The shoe comes down. We need more from you, manager. We need more from you, employee. We need more, and it ends up being a little bit messy, right? People will leave the company. Shareholder value does not return for quite some time. Having a plan before this happens is really, really important. Because the problem in due diligence is it's just due diligence. When the day that this company closes, everything gets discovered, right? All the things that you didn't know, that you're not privy to know, you will know on close day. And so a lot of management gets stuck on handling all of the minutia, what's going to happen after close day, without having a plan for the people part of it. So the role that you have is one of the most important roles in a company. Make no mistake. It's what you do with those people to manage pieces of that. So that's really important to understand that piece. And also there is conflicting values. So Angen Thacker is a partner with Bob Quinn. He wrote the book Deep Change. If you don't have that book, please put that on your list. It is a very powerful book for organizational change. I absolutely loved this class because it was the science behind what I know to be true. So the colors of business, this is what it's called. When you have a red organization, you're going to have an organization that's really focused on business process. Okay? If you've got an organization that is over here in this taskmaster role, that may be one that's more focused on sales, more focused on profits. If you have a green organization, you're probably a tech company, you're a growing company, you need to innovate, right? The yellow is the motivator, which is kind of what we all do, right? They all think that we're the country club artists, but that's really not what we do. It's really around being able to help people keep the pieces and colors of business going. These are conflicting values. If you take a process-driven company, and I'll just use Mercy, right? If you've got Epic and you've got processes in place, but yet something happens and you need for them to innovate, you're going to have conflict. These are conflicting values for each other. Conflicting values for salespeople. I was in a sales organization. If my reps are paid as individual reps and you rank them, they're not going to be sharing information because that's how they're being paid. So there's conflicting values in this framework here. So we'll give a little bit more in depth of that. Kind of talks about, the red is around doing things right. It's around efficiency. It's around quality. When you look at competing, it's really around speed and profit. Creating, it's really around innovation and growth. And purpose and knowledge is in your yellow. So tell me, what is the most important color of the wheel? Yellow. Why? It's simple, but there really is, you're right, it's exactly right. It is the people part of it, right? Because if you don't take care of the people part of it and you can't create a trusting environment for them to be able to stay in the internal processes, making sure that they are competitive, if you don't have the yellow piece that is the most important color of business, it's so obvious, but it's not obvious to CEOs. It's just not. It's also not obvious when you're looking at the bottom line and looking at your numbers because you're watching numbers. The problem is there's a story behind the numbers. You have to understand what is the story behind the numbers. That's the job that you guys have, is being able to understand what that is. So what is the cost of a cultural tornado? In 2015, the U.S. lost $1.5 trillion in shareholder value due to unsuccessful mergers of culture. $1.5 trillion. It's a lot of money. Employees who are less trusted by their managers exert less effort and are more likely to leave the organization. They will leave you. Going back to this right here, this is really important, right? If this buzz takes off and they don't trust their manager, they're going to leave you. That's where a lot of some of this comes into. So when you look at employee engagement, if you look at not having a clear communication plan, a clear strategy plan about what you want to communicate, expect them to go. They're going to leave. They're going to look for other things. More than $500 billion was siphoned off from the U.S. economy because of workforce stress in organizations with low engagement. They experienced 18% lower productivity and 65% lower shareholder value. If you want to talk to your CEOs, if you want to talk to your people in charge, you will have to carry the torch for increasing shareholder value. That statement resonates with them. Money resonates, right? How are you going to do that? You're going to do that through your people. So let's talk a little bit about motivation traps. I do have an article, the science behind that. I want to give full credit to Professor Jackson Nickerson, also Marcus Baer, and also Kurt Dirks around these motivational traps. I'm sure you're familiar with that, right? Probably know all about that. So, information, what's needed and is it clear? You've got people who in teams will say, I know a lot. They're going to jump right in there. They're going to tell you about their diverse experiences. They're going to tell you about their knowledge, and they're going to be right? So there's a motivation over there. There's also motivation around politics. If you're in an organization and somebody's kind of the golden child or they're moving through things, you've seen this happen, right? They learn how to play that role. So they've got traps that get in the way. And so you have to figure out how you're going to do that. So how you can do that is really around framing and formulation of the right problem, right? But you have to be able to hold a space to be able to facilitate that space. So how do you manage these behavioral shifts? As I said to you, I love leadership coaching. Leadership coaching is more effective for me when I do it in a group-based coaching because it's real time. I see that in teams right now, even right now as we finish my executive MBA program, we all have our team-based coaching, we've got our teams. It's funny to me because when I sit down and watch it and absorb it, right? So you've got your case, you finish your case, they're going to tell you to take 45 minutes and we're going to give you 3 problems to solve. You go into the room and everybody starts saying, well, I'll take this, I'm good at that, I'll take this, I'm good at that, I'll take this, I'm good at that. No one sits down and still talks about what does the ultimate paper need to say? What is the problem we need to solve, right? So it's classic, right? We get stuck in this mode of what we're gonna do. So just realize that when people jump to solution mode, it is your job to stop that place. You have to be able to get people to slow down a little bit and say, where are we going, what are we doing? Facilitating that is really an important process to do, and I found it to be extremely important. So it is a group identified issue, right? The group has to come to an agreement on what is that space or what is that question. The group actually facilitates kind of the symptoms and the causes, and we're going to practice a little bit of that today, kind of based on time, so I can give you a little bit of a flavor of that. It's important, like I said, withholding solutions. When people come in and they want to jump in and want to give you a solution, it's really important that you stop them and say, what is the question we're trying to solve? Okay? Ask them, try not to lead the group if you can, hold that space. And that's very difficult because people want to be very solution. We are in a solution-oriented culture right now. Everything's fast food. It's all just in time. We want it right now. We want to fix it. We want to go, go, go. That's not going to give you your best solution because you're never going to get to the right problem. And if you don't get to the right problem, you cannot execute a good strategy. I can't say that enough because you will come back and revisit it every time. Vetting for the right problem takes about 60% of the time or longer. some of the women's group that I have, and especially for executive women, there was one evening that we actually took us 2 hours to get to the right problem. It's because we hang on to what we think or we feel, and it's really hard to be vulnerable enough to let that go. So it's really important to understand kind of where people are. So if you are in your organization right now and you are working with teams of people, it is incumbent upon you to figure out, how are they motivated? Can you figure out what is their personality? How are they motivated? What is their past, right? Maybe they're really good at something, which is great. You want that, right? But you want to make sure that you are on high notes so that they don't come in and solve the problem for the entire team. The team has to come with you, right? The team has to come together. And as that team comes together, that solidifies a place of safety. It also solidifies a place of trust. If people don't trust each other in a team, you're not going to get very far because everybody's motivated differently, right? If they get what they've got out of it, they're great. But if you want your team to go together and you want them performing well, you're going to have to make sure to create that. So let's talk about this. This is not an unknown picture. Everybody's seen this a million times. But it is truly this bottom part, right? This fear and this doubt, this lack of confidence. You'll see a lot of people withholding in your teams because they're not confident that the question's going to be valued enough. Maybe they are feeling dismissed. You have to make sure that people don't get dismissed during your groups. Figuring out the motivational traps. Biases that are formed will stop adequate application of the formulation process. We all have them. It is just a fact of life that we have biases in judgment. Just like my experience going through a merger and acquisition, right? My experience that time in 1995, that was my belief, and my belief dictated my results. When I came here, I had nobody. I did not have family. I had no help. I had a company who gave me money and said, go out, find a place, execute your territory. I need you to be a really high performer, and you got to be able to create it. When I came into that situation, we were the people, the bot company, who changed the buying company's incentive compensation, right? Because they had to pay for us. So we got known as the people who took money out of their pocket. We were not very easily received. So, you know, those experiences do dictate how people react and how people believe. So there can be a bias. So anything that has effect with other people in the company, those biases will have an effect on somebody else. So why it's so crucially important to make sure that you have a good relationship with those people in these teams and that you truly understand how are they motivated, what have they experienced, so you can help them stay in the truth of what your company is asking them to do. We've all seen this too as well. Culture's focused on execution. One of the key things that I learned very early on in that coaching process in 2011 is that you must measure in minutes, not miles. Minutes are activity-based components, right? So if you're figuring out a strategic plan, right, a lot of people should be smart, very specific, measurable, actionable, and relevant and timely, right? We know that. What ends up happening is that you're not measuring some of the things that need to happen along the way. If you're not measuring those, and if you are a leader, and this happened to me, so this is why I think it was really helpful for me to have a coach, because I learned this very clearly on, is that I may be looking at performance at a quarterly basis. I may be looking at performance maybe, you know, every year. I've got to do my business review. I can tell you that was my number one mistake, because you've got to measure things weekly. You measure in minutes, not miles. So that's really important. So if you don't have a clear road, people don't know where you're going. So having the right vision, in conclusion, having the right vision is extremely important. Having a team create the vision, and you want it to align to the strategy of the company. You don't want to stray away from that strategy. You want to align to them. But there are things within a team that they want to execute, and you cannot take one corporate strategy, if you have a global company, and apply the corporate strategy to every single area of the market, because your market will be different. You have to look at your market and being able to study what is your market drivers and what do you need to make sure to keep that at a very high level of acceleration. Understanding that solving the right problem is the most crucial part of strategy development. If you do not get that right, you will be spending a lot of time figuring out what went wrong. So I can't stress that enough. 100% of the time, I've never seen it any different. We're all solving the wrong problem. Making sure that you understand the motivations and the traps that these teams are having is really important. And then what's your plan? Once again, if your company is transitioning, if it's changing in leadership change, if it's restructure, whatever that may be, all of the same symptoms that you see when you have a merger and acquisition, they all apply. It may be a little bit different because it's maybe not so organizationally changing, maybe small shifts, but if you can break this down a little bit and execute this really well and to define that strategy, you will find that things will be much more profitable.